Spectrovision Radio.
The most haunted spot in West Sussex is considered by many to be Chanctonbury Ring, a prehistoric fort made of trees, which sits atop a tall hill in the South Downs, an area of outstanding natural beauty consisting of rolling chalk hills, scenic walking routes, and swooping dry valleys, situated along the southeastern counties of England. Despite its vast splendour, one could also regard the area as a whole lot of nothing, a strange place the unrelenting march of history for some reason deemed worth preserving in its wild, people-scarce state. A place where things could happen, as it were, behind God's back. Chanctonbury Ring in particular speaks to the area being somehow separate from the world around it. Why someone, so long ago that even records don't hold a concrete answer, wanted or needed a ring fort made entirely of trees atop this natural kingdom is unknown. Simply put, no one knows who created it or what its purpose truly was. Local folklore claims it was made by the devil himself, and that he can be conjured via a summoning ritual which involves walking backwards around the ring 7 times on a moonless night, which will cause him to appear and offer to grant you your greatest wish in exchange for your soul, a deal which is sealed if you accept his gift of a bowl of soup. Aleister Crowley was drawn to it, and it's considered by many to have been a place of sacrifice, a place in which to conduct rituals away from the prying eyes of the world. Many campers who have braved a night in the ring have described waking up to the sounds of screaming. When my aspiring author friend Rory told me he wanted to visit Chanctonbury Ring as part of a book proposal he was researching, a horror novel utilising local legend as its playground, I saw it as an opportunity to have a bit of fun. Neither of us actually believed any of that stuff, but we'd both been raised on enough of a diet of scary films and spooky books to get a giddy thrill out of having our rationality given the gentlest of prods. Besides, beyond all that, it was an opportunity to hang out, have some fireside drinks and get away from the city. We parked and hiked for a few hours, up and up through the hills, surrounded only by endless horizons, until the fort became visible in the distance. It looked like a circular forest sitting atop the highest point. We ventured inside, penetrating the tree line and heading straight for the central point of the ring. As we began to set up camp, I was struck by the odd, cocooning feeling of being inside that circular forest. It prevented you from seeing out, giving the impression that the world stopped at its edge. We built a fire, chatted and had a few drinks. Rory even read from a book of local folklore that had a section on the ring, attempting to give reasons for its haunted quality. Horrific murders, ancient evils, blah blah blah. Everything you'd expect. Once we'd had enough alcohol and worked ourselves up enough, we performed the devil summoning ritual, which the book also featured. We chanted the words, walked backwards around the ring, but of course no one appeared. As the light faded, I began to understand how it had earned its reputation as an unsettling place. All the trees were such different shapes and sizes, lacking any predictable uniformity, that whenever I turned my head, I kept thinking I'd seen the outline of a person, the silhouette of a gnarled, uneven figure watching me, only to quickly realise it was just an optical illusion, caused by the flora being backlit by the setting sun. So that's why, when our surroundings were lit only by the glow of our fire, and I saw something that looked remarkably like a person, I had to stop and try to make sure it wasn't just another silhouette before I alerted Rory. "What is that?" I asked. I could tell by Rory's intense stare that he'd seen it too. Then, it moved. Even with the distance and the fire as our only light source, it was unmistakably a person. As it traced the perimeter of the ring, I thought I could make out that whoever it was wearing a heavy, waxy jacket with the hood up. The figure stopped again, remained motionless, facing inwards, facing us. A light flashed, and then they made their way behind the outer rim of trees and disappeared. It was strange, no doubt, But Rory wondered aloud if it was some kind of environmental officer taking a photo, perhaps wanting evidence that we'd started a fire where we weren't supposed to, so they could issue a fine. We tried to forget about it, but we were rattled. So when I spotted the figure again, this time in a different position, but still just standing there staring at us, my body went into high alert. This was not normal behavior, and we were vulnerable, sitting ducks in the night. And this time, the figure began to venture into the ring, right towards us with purposeful strides. "Hello?" I called. No reply. No alteration to their stride. "Hello?" They got closer still. "Hello?" I said, this time making my voice big, not threatening, but lacing it with enough of a hint so that the person would know that I could be. At this, the figure stopped in its tracks. "I saw your fire from miles away," it said. The voice was gentle, unassuming. The figure removed its hood to reveal that beneath it was a man of around 30 or so with a boyish face. He looked so innocent, so non-threatening, but I checked my watch. It was nearly 3 a.m. There was nowhere nearby that this man could have been going to, or coming from, that would take less than a 2-hour walk. Nowhere accessible by car that meant he could come here for a quick stroll. Whatever he was doing, he'd set off in the pitch black and walked into the middle of nowhere, alone. As I was contemplating that unnerving reality, questioning what kind of person would do such a thing, I was blinded by another flashing light. Once my eyes readjusted, I saw that the man was holding a point-and-click camera. Stunned, I watched as he turned and took a picture of Rory too. He offered a friendly smile and pocketed the camera. "That's all," he said. And before Rory or I could protest and ask him what on earth he was doing, he turned on his heel and trudged away from us, briskly moving past the tree line, exiting the ring and disappearing into the thick of night that lay beyond the glow of our campfire. We'd been too perplexed to head out after him and demand an explanation. An incredulous, "What the fuck was that?" was all I could muster. We contemplated hiking back to the car, but it didn't seem like a feasible prospect in the thick dark of that isolated night. So we stuck to the original plan and camped. But the experience had creeped us out enough that I don't think either of us got much sleep. Our tongue-in-cheek sense that we'd be greeted by the devil had been replaced by the very real sense that we'd stumbled across someone potentially unhinged. Someone deranged enough to think that hiking all the way to the ring in the pitch black, watching 2 campers from the perimeter, and then taking photographs of them was acceptable behavior. It didn't bode well for what else they might think was okay. Several years went by, and sure enough we embellished the story of what had happened that night into a dramatic yarn which elicited nervous giggles and delighted squeals in equal measure. But soon enough we ran out of friends to tell it to, and it became a distant memory we occasionally dusted off over drinks. Life was ticking quicker by the year, it seemed. Rory's career was starting to take off. He never did write the proposal he'd been researching, the reason for our trip to Chanctonbury Ring. But his first 2 novels, commercial thrillers, where drip-fed plots gave way to twisty reveals, had done reasonably well, and the upward trajectory of the sales meant both he and his new agent, an American named Peter Lafont who seemed hell-bent on getting Rory to where Peter said he had the right to be, were optimistic that the 3rd book would be the one to really unlock his full potential. I'd always suspected that what Rory really wanted was not to write a book he'd forever be proud of, but to be a famous author. That he desired the status more than anything else, to be adored, to be someone. My suspicions were somewhat confirmed when Rory told me that Peter Lafont was a well-connected, shark-like player in the industry, and that Peter's help was the equivalent of taking a shortcut to success. He seemed most pleased by the prospect of getting to where he wanted to be quickly, rather than truly earning it. But who was I to judge? I was guilty of a more rudderless kind of desire for the finer things in life. Unlike Rory, with his unwavering sense of what he was meant to be doing, I'd never felt like I had a calling. All I'd ever enjoyed was socializing, travel, nightlife. I never admitted it outwardly, but I guess I always wanted to be a man of leisure, to shun the responsibility of adulthood and enjoy simply being, indulging myself. I wanted a life of pleasure. My great-uncle died, and to my surprise, he left me a sum of money that meant I'd be able to do just that, simply exist without worrying, for a couple of years at least. It enabled that part of me that just wanted to coast. Aside from a small amount my mum pleaded with me to invest, I was focused only on living in the moment, the here and now. The way I saw it, there was always time to figure out tomorrow. Rory and I remained friends, but we gradually saw each other less and less now his career was taking off and I was, well, constantly taking off to distant lands on new adventures. But we did share some great times nonetheless, Rory's stag do and wedding being of particular note. He and his long-term girlfriend decided to tie the knot, and I opted to use some of the money I'd inherited to fund a stag do of epic proportions, all expenses paid. The wedding itself was also a truly magical occasion, culminating in Rory and I sharing an embrace and remarking how, whatever happened next in life, we shared a bond that couldn't be broken. I'd somehow breezed through much of my life thanks to a few fortuitous coincidences, followed by a few fortuitous decisions. But I won't pretend I didn't wax lyrical about it all being the result of astute calculations when given the chance. The money my mum had pressured me to invest with a financial advisor she'd become acquainted with, a man named Victor Lidev, had paid off very nicely. So I took his advice and kept investing. Everything he told me to touch turned to gold. The good times rolled, and I ate and drank too much in places that charged me through the nose for it, and dressed in expensive clothes that compensated for my expanding waistline, and the slight thinning of my hair I was beginning to notice when I looked in the mirror. I had a string of boyfriends and girlfriends far too good looking for me, and lived in desirable city after desirable city. Rome, Paris, Berlin. Moving on whenever I felt they'd lost their charm, and I needed something new. It was, I have to say, utterly wonderful. And it did unlock in me a desire, not a burning insatiable need to do one specific thing, but a moderate flame that asked me to dabble. I became a Renaissance man, dipping into everything from painting to woodwork, cooking to photography. At that point, life itself started to feel like one big hobby, an enjoyable pastime that didn't need a greater purpose. As for Rory, we'd exchanged the odd email here and there, but we'd eventually lost touch entirely. The last interaction we'd had was a quick message I'd fired over to him whilst I was sipping my mid-morning coffee from a penthouse I was renting in Madrid, located in a trendy, hip neighbourhood called Malasaña, which I was rinsing for every ounce of debauched fun it had to offer. Scrolling on my phone, I came across the instantly recognisable, handsome face of an A-list actor, below a headline announcing that another of Rory's bestsellers was getting a star-studded, big-budget TV adaptation. He'd taken around a month to reply, and all it said was, "Thanks, hope you're well." But I didn't begrudge him it. I hadn't been the best at keeping in touch over the years either. It was enough for me to see, from afar, that he was living his dreams. Things only changed once tiny fractures began to appear somewhere I couldn't really pay my way out of. My mind. It started towards the end of my time in Madrid. I was browsing antique jewellery in the famed El Rastro market when a ring took my fancy. I asked if I could try it on and was promptly handed it. But when I slipped it onto my finger, the sight of my flesh being trapped in its centre, of my finger being surrounded on all sides by that circle, stirred something in me. I couldn't explain it, but I felt fearful. It was a feeling that followed me home from the market, one that became a constant presence in my life. I'd wake up in the night, with whoever was sleeping next to me still there undisturbed. It felt as if I'd been catapulted into the waking world through some kind of anxiety, the sense that something was getting closer, a sense of real dread that whatever was coming, it wasn't good. I'd walk around the house, trying to put my finger on what I was feeling. Later, a therapist I contacted who I hoped could help me with sleeping asked me things like, "Does it feel like the walls are closing in?" And, "Is there something in your life you're trying to run from?" but none of that struck a chord with me. All I could articulate was that it felt like something was getting closer, coming for me, more inevitable each time it happened. I had no sense of what it was, just that something was approaching from all around, and I was positioned dangerously in its center. Eventually, the therapist assured me that what I was experiencing were hypnagogic hallucinations, a kind of waking dream, or in this case nightmare, and suggested I try sleeping aids if the experiences continued to bother me. I left Madrid behind, just as I had all the other places, but the problem followed me. The sense that something would soon arrive became so palpable, so looming, it scared me. I felt as if an unknown assailant was sneaking up on me from behind, only for me to swivel round and find it too had flipped, so it was always behind me. I began to fear going to bed, fear that the night would bring one of those bewildering, desperate episodes. And then one day, while I was in Soho, London, I was walking past a bookshop and saw Rory's latest novel being advertised in the window. We hadn't spoken in years, and I stopped in my tracks when I saw it, not because I'd seen his name in bold, elongated lettering on the cover, but because of the book's title, Closer Each Night. I rushed inside and purchased a copy, taking it straight back to my hotel. My jaw almost hit the floor when I started reading. The story was about a man plagued by the same affliction I was, that same invasive sense of dread when awoken in the middle of the night. I sped through it, but the rest of the novel made little sense to me. If it was all a metaphor or something like that, it went over my head. I found myself emailing Rory, needing an explanation. I didn't even know if he still had the same email address, but I didn't hear back from him. Confused, I went back to the beginning of the book for a second read-through, and when I did, I was left questioning my cognitive faculties. The element I'd so identified with, the man who'd shared my strange affliction, was a mere footnote, lost amidst the rest of the sprawling plot. It seemed I was unraveling so much that I couldn't even trust my own mind anymore. And my dreams, night terrors, hallucinations, whatever they were, they got worse. I needed uninterrupted sleep, needed to avoid the possibility of waking up in the middle of the night and experiencing that unforgiving feeling. The only way I could guarantee I'd get through till morning was to completely anesthetize myself. But that quickly turned into a chemical dependency and an alcohol problem, one that started to have an effect on my waking life. I was burning through money like it was going out of style, and it wasn't long before I found myself in desperate need of cash. I felt like I was perpetually wandering through a dream, not fully there, and that meant my judgment suffered. It had been a steady descent since I'd been released from prison. I'd just been too broken to make a go of it, and it wasn't long before I was back in the booze and anything else I could get my hands on. I still woke up in the night, only now it was the sounds of the street that catapulted me back into the world. A car slinking by, footsteps, a nocturnal animal rustling in the bushes. One day, a couple of other rough sleepers I knew told me a new place had been opened, part of an initiative to cater for the increased demand in the area. I headed over there to see if I could get a hot meal. I found it easy enough, and made my way inside. It was full of people as desperate as I was. But my attention was drawn to a man sitting across the room from me. Hunched shoulders, patchy beard, long unkempt hair. It took me a second, but once it clicked, I knew it was Rory. I made my way over and just stood beside where he was sitting. Eventually, he looked up at me with defeated eyes and seemed to go through the same process I had, unsure of who I was at first, but clearly recognizing me, and then having the image in front of him connect with the old one, updating. I sat down in front of him. I wondered how the hell he'd ended up there with me. But as we stared at one another, both barely recognizable broken versions of two young men who'd once been close friends. I knew he was thinking the same about me. Eventually, we got up and headed to where they were dishing out the food. We queued in silence for a while, and eventually we were handed our meals. 2 bowls of soup. I was still standing there, holding my tray, when suddenly, the sound of a deep, lunatic laugh caused me to jerk my head sideways. It was Rory. His eyes were wide, and with each passing second his laugh got more frantic, more wild. He began to shake as laughter overtook his body to the point that he slid to the floor, a puddle of hysterical cackling, rolling around in the liquid of his spilt meal. It wasn't until I looked back at what I was holding in my hands, the bowl of soup, that it hit me too. And when it did, I felt the laughter rise up in me and explode out of my mouth. So ferocious was its force that I too ended up on the floor beside Rory, the two of us squirming around, laughing at the perverseness of it all. It was the laughter of madness, of pain, of a terrifying, inevitable circle closing.